DVD-Forum.at wieder live hier von der Gamescom 2014. Neben mir sitzt Bob Roberts, Lead Designer von Shadow of Mordor. And Bob, if you tackle a franchise as big as The Lord of the Rings, which is, I think, one of the biggest franchises at the time, how difficult is it for you to work with this topic?
It's actually not as hard as you might think. We're all huge fans, so the lore, the authenticity of everything is really important to us, and all the themes and the details are just running through our blood right now. So we're just excited to get to tell a story here and work with this material that we've loved for so long.
So your story is set in between The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings films. How did you approach the material? Because I think fans can be quite a bit picky about little details that might be slightly off. How did you try to avoid that?
So we, again, being such big fans, our starting point is really to try and make sure that from our perspective it's as authentic as possible. And then of course we're working closely with Middle-earth Enterprises. They're seeing everything we write, every idea we have that we want to try, and vetting it, making sure that they're comfortable with it fitting and being authentic and making sense in this world. We took a lot of inspiration from the films as well as the books, which, you know, there are some slight differences there. There are like some minor timeline discrepancies or things, so we have to decide which continuity we're going to follow in a few cases, but there's nothing really contradictory or that we're trying to bring into that's not got a really strong foundation in the written materials. So that's, you know, from our perspective, setting it in between the two films, books, The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, there's this long period between those where 60, 70 years where Sauron has returned to Mordor and is just building up, and it's all in transition, preparing for what happens in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but you don't necessarily know exactly how he got to that exact moment where he's got the forces that he's got at that point after being driven out of Dol Guldur by the White Council. So getting to flesh that out and show people Mordor, which they know about generally, but you don't explore in great detail in either the books or the films.
Will there be locations and characters from the books and the movies that you will see in the game, maybe some that haven't been revealed as much in the trailers?
So we start the game on the Black Gates, you know, one of the most iconic locations in Mordor, the Black Gates that right there on the boundary, and the other important character that we have talked about a little bit, but we're showing for the first time here at Gamescom in context, is Gollum. You know, he's just had the ring stolen from him by Bilbo, and he's trying to find it, and it draws him into Mordor at this time, so that's where we cross paths with him. And of course Sauron is a big part of the whole world here. It's his return to Mordor and attempt to build back up, and the wraith that's inhabiting Talion, the ranger character, the other half of your kind of main protagonist here is Celebrimbor, who, you know, if you've only watched the films, maybe you're not familiar with Celebrimbor. But he's one of the most powerful and important characters in the history of Middle-earth. I mean, crafting the Rings of Power with Sauron in the Second Age, so getting to illuminate that and show people what that was like and the relationship they had when Sauron was actually beautiful and fair-formed. You know, Anatar, the Lord of Gifts, is something that a lot of people only think of him as the giant spiky, you know, armor and mace. Yeah.
So you're working with stories that are known for being long books and long movies. How long can we expect the game to be?
It's an open world game with a huge amount of side content and side activities, so it can vary quite a bit if you're trying to be a completionist versus just race through the main missions. But the typical playthrough we're seeing in playtest is, you know, at least 20 or 30 hours.
And gameplay-wise, what can we expect from the game? Are there maybe some parallels to other games that we might be familiar with?
So it's a third-person open-world sandbox game, and we've got a huge focus on being able to fluidly move between stealth mechanics, open combat. That's very similar to our brethren in WB here, the Arkham guys. We took their combat as like best in class. That was our model to begin with, and then we could evolve it to become more lethal and to take advantage of the wraith abilities and all of that. And then also ranged with your bow and arrow, and then beyond even your interactions with your blades and your bow, you've got the ability to escalate to where you dominate enemies and start manipulating them and sending them to kill each other, so you don't even always have to directly be the guy responsible for taking people out.
For you personally, what's the most awesome thing you can make your character do in the game?
That's a fun question because there's so many crazy tools that all mix in the sandbox to create emergent chaos and stories that one of my favorite things is to unleash a Caragor, a giant kind of big cat beast, out of a cage in the middle of a stronghold full of guys, and then set off an explosion, light him on fire, and watch him run around catching guys on fire as he mauls them and bumps into everything. That's my favorite little moment of chaos.
And are there any plans for DLC and additional content coming next year?
We haven't announced anything about DLC yet, so that's all I can say.
Okay, and the last question is, with Lord of the Rings being a successful movie franchise, can you imagine your game being, put into movie form at some point?
That would be amazing. That would be like a dream come true. I think we've got a really interesting story that's worth telling here, and Troy Baker as Talion does an amazing job, so I could see that, yeah.
So I say thanks a lot for the interview, thanks for talking to us, und euch danke fürs Zuschauen, DVD-Forum.at, live auf der Gamescom.